Welcome to the channel, everyone. I am your Lord of the Rings fanatic. Join me here at the Prancing Pony. We're about to have second breakfast. At 11's, we'll have a cup of tea with some lembas bread. Gandalf should have stayed dead. This from J.R.R. Martin in an interview. Today we're going to talk about Mr. Martin's comments and criticisms of Professor Tolkien in the context of Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces and the fairy tale motif of the death and resurrection of the hero. We are talking about Gandalf's battle with the Balrog of Morgoth known as Durin's Bane. In The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, in a chapter called The White Rider, Gandalf gives an account of this story to Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli when they have met in Fangorn Forest. Gandalf says to them, "Long I fell, and he fell with me. His fire was about me. Then we plunged into the deep water, and all was dark. Cold it was as the tide of death. It almost froze my heart." Gimli interjects, "Deep is the abyss that is spanned by Durin's bridge, and none has measured it." Gandalf continues, "Yet it has a bottom, beyond light and knowledge. There I lay staring upward, while the stars wheeled over the sky in that forgotten world. Then he was upon me again. We fought far under the living earth, where time is not counted. Ever he clutched me, and ever I hewed him. Till the last he fled into the dark tunnels. They were not made by Durin's folk, Gimli, son of Gloin. Far, far below the deepest delving of the dwarves, the world is gnawed by nameless things. Even Sauron knows them not. They are older than he. But my enemy was strong, and I fell. Thrice he smote me, and thrice I was flung down. Ever he grew, and I shrank. He had a fire whip of many tongs. He coiled it about me. We wrestled and rolled from the deep, and came at last to the endless stair. From the lowest dungeon to the highest peak it climbed, ascending in unbroken spiral in many thousands of steps, until it issued at last on the high snowy summit of Zirex-Sigil, the pinnacle of Silverteen. There at last we fought upon the peak while the world was in darkness. He was a thing of slime, stronger than a strangling snake. Behind me was the black abyss. I threw down my enemy, and he fell from the high place and broke the mountainside, where he smote it in his ruin. Then darkness took me, and I strayed out of thought and time, and I wandered far on roads that I will not tell." So why was Gandalf sent back? Why did Eru-Ilúvatar send Gandalf back? So you have to understand Tolkien's hierarchy of heaven. Eru-Ilúvatar is the All-Father, the Supreme Being who created the Ainur. The Ainur are the Holy Ones, split between the Valar and the Maiar. Now the Valar are the archangels, whereas the Maiar are the lesser angels. Now Gandalf, Saruman, Sauron, and the Balrogs were all Maiar, whereas Melkor/Morgoth was a Valar. So really the Balrogs were fallen Maiar. Valarukar, meaning demons of power. So it was an equal fight, and Gandalf could have lost that fight. It was a very dangerous fight for Gandalf. They were essentially immortal beings who were in physical form, and therefore could be killed. So Saruman was also a Maiar, who was the head of the Order, who was sent to defeat Sauron and the One Ring. So Saruman deliberately betrayed the trust of Eru-Ilúvatar, and he wanted to wield the ring that he swore to destroy. And so because of this treachery, Eru-Ilúvatar sent Gandalf back as the head of the Order, as Saruman was supposed to be, the White Wizard. Gandalf was also sent back to cast down Saruman entirely. So what did J.R.R. Martin say in his criticism of Tolkien exactly? He said, and I quote, "As much as I admired Tolkien, I always thought that Gandalf should have stayed dead. I never liked him coming back, and it would have been an even stronger story if Tolkien had left him dead." So I wanted to talk about this in the context of Joseph Campbell and the fairy tale motif of the death and resurrection of the hero. You know, it's interesting that Professor Tolkien was deeply engaged with European fairy tales and folk tales. As a linguist, Tolkien was a professional philologist of ancient Germanic languages and Old English. So by understanding fairy tale structure, we can understand more about J.R.R. Tolkien's writings. Joseph Campbell and Professor Tolkien were both studying fairy tales and folktales. So the fairy tale motif of the death and resurrection of the hero, which Joseph Campbell discusses in The Hero with 1,000 Faces. So this is a classic motif where the hero is reborn or resurrected, often with new knowledge and new skills and a deeper understanding of themselves in the world. It's a pivotal moment in the hero's journey, allowing the hero to move forward to the climax and take on that antagonist or villain of the story, and ultimately triumph over adversity. In Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, this stage is known as the resurrection. We also know it as the dark night of the soul, or the crisis of the story. And usually through the synergy of a helper or mentor, the hero is able to overcome this symbolic death. And so really this debate centers on a different philosophy between Professor Tolkien and George.R.R. Martin. Now, George.R.R. Martin really has turned this motif on its head, and I have no problem with that. We can take fairy tale motifs and tweak them and change them, and that's the beauty of storytelling. So Martin's characters that came back from death were worse for wear. They lose a little bit of themselves. They lose their humanity. They are basically the animated dead. Now, this is very different from the hero's journey, Dark Night of the Soul, where the hero gets through this moment and is transformed for the better. So as somebody who watched every episode of Game of Thrones, here's the philosophy that I got out of it. Death will find us all, and there is no resisting the darkness that will overcome us. That's the theme and philosophy that I got out of this work. Now compare this to the hope that Tolkien has instilled in his writings, as is in the writings of many heroic epics. And it was Sam who said it best. Hope that there's some good in this world and it's worth fighting for. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even the darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. So maybe when George.R.R. Martin said, Gandalf should have stayed dead, he didn't really understand the meaning of the death and resurrection of the hero as discussed by Joseph Campbell. Because this is about renewal and transformation of the hero, and really, we are living in the moment of creation. We can be born in every moment. We can be new again. So one last thing about this criticism of Tolkien's writings when Martin said, Gandalf should have stayed dead. Mr. Martin, what you said is one of the most idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point during your incoherent ramblings were you even close to making a point. We are all dumber for having heard it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. All right, with that, let's go to the phones. Jimmy from Sydney, you're on the air.
Epic episode, mate. Really good.
You can always count on me to take a stand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for you. If Gandalf lost the fight to the Balrog and Gandalf stayed dead, then would the Balrog have joined Sauron in ruling Middle-earth?
Now, personally, I don't think the Balrog Durin's-Bane would have followed Sauron. And here's why. Both Sauron and the Balrogs were Maiar, were the lesser angels who served Morgoth. And even though Sauron was of a higher order of Maiar, who had a kind of an independent role under Morgoth, the Balrogs never served him. And so I believe that the Balrog Durin's-Bane would have been king under the mountain in Moria and would have had his own army of orcs who had pledged allegiance to him. And that eventually, that over time, in this new world order where Sauron was the king of Middle-earth, there would have been another battle fought between Sauron and Durin's-Bane, and that their armies would clash, and that finally Sauron would defeat Durin's-Bane because he would not allow any power to compete with him as the ruler of Middle-earth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much. And by the way, I wanted to thank Sam Gamgee777 and Smog Stash for leaving some great comments on the previous video. Please give me some comments. I love to have this debate. This is the arena of ideas where we can come together and talk about these different topics, different philosophies. Let's keep the conversation going. So remember to subscribe, like, hit the bell. We'll be bringing you new content. It's almost 11s here at the Prancing Pony, so time for that cup of tea and some lembas bread. Where is that Barlaman Butterbur anyway? Everything we do here is for you, the home viewer. Thank you so much for being with me. See you next week.